If you've been following intermittent fasting or a low carbohydrate diet for any length of time, it may be time to rethink what you're doing with your diet. Hey guys, I'm Dr. Arland Hill out at Harvest Hills Ranch, and I recently had a question. In fact, let me actually just be extremely specific of how this video came about. I was actually shooting a video for our farm talking about eggs, and I got a text that came across from a doctor that I did a consult with earlier today who is seeing a 27-year-old patient, 27-year-old male who had low testosterone, who was suffering from fatigue, inability to sleep, and just didn't quite feel like a 27-year-old should feel. And I got a response back. We had this consult, doctor and I talked through it, and I gave her some ideas to present to the patient. We reviewed the labs together. We had a plan that she was going to deliver to the patient. And when she went back to the patient, the last thing her and I had talked about is that she was going to make sure that she discussed the diet with this patient, looking at the amount of protein that they're eating, and also looking at their physical activity. I literally finish up this other video and I get a text from this doc saying that this patient is dedicated to intermittent fasting, eating only one time a day at 1 p.m. and keeping his blood glucose level, wait for it, because he heard on a podcast that intermittent fasting was a way to maintain longevity. All right, guys, this is about the umpteenth time that I have heard this argument. So let's talk about the other side of this scenario. And I started seeing this really not long after the intermittent fasting craze came around. I started noticing that patients that were sticking to this and they were extremely dedicated to this on a daily basis and were keeping their carbohydrates extremely low, maybe following a keto or some other type of dietary pattern of a low carbohydrate nature, they were ultimately finding that once they had been on this for an extended period of time, they felt worse. Now, was this inherently every single person that I saw that was following this dietary pattern? No, it wasn't. But it caught my attention because there was a large enough portion of this population that this was happening to. Now, let's connect this to this 27-year-old male patient. This individual had a testosterone under 300. Guys, a male patient, 27 years old, a testosterone under 300. This is at the bottom of the barrel. His blood urea nitrogen levels are down around 13. I know this guy's not consuming enough protein to meet his basic metabolic needs. So if you look at this, we have to ask ourselves if we're bottoming out our hormones, and if his testosterone's low, it's not the only hormone that's low. Other androgens are low, DHEA, androstenedione, likely his cortisol, because every time this individual is getting into these hypoglycemic states, he has to trigger cortisol to try to bring that try to keep that glucose at a stable level. If you continue to do that on and on and on, you've essentially shifted your body into a catabolic state where muscle tissue breakdown becomes more optimal because it is what is necessary to keep your body going. It becomes the fuel source to fuel the tissues in your body. You eliminate on the opposite side the anabolic activity. We want to be able to build. We want to be able to develop. We want to be able to regenerate tissue at a fast enough pace to maintain an overall state of health. That is in complete opposition to longevity. When we see someone that is going on an intermittent fast and they're doing it to an extreme, or they're going on a low carbohydrate diet and they're doing it to an extreme, you are doing it at the detriment of longevity. You are doing it at the detriment of being able to build muscle tissue and, more importantly, maintain that muscle tissue into your later years of life. Maintaining muscle tissue, avoiding sarcopenia, being able to keep that muscle tissue on the body and to be able to maintain functionality. We see things like grip strength. Being able to maintain good grip strength into our later years of life is a marker for looking at longevity. The greater our grip strength is, the greater our longevity is likely to be. So if you've been on an intermittent fast and you're succeeding with it and it is working for you, by all means, don't let anything I'm saying deter you. But if you have been doing intermittent fasting or keeping your carbohydrates in your diet extremely low or almost absent, and you feel like you're not thriving, you feel like your weight gain is becoming a problem, you don't have mental clarity, you don't have the sex drive that you feel like you should, guys, that is a very clear indicator that you need to put carbohydrates back in your diet. And you have to eliminate this mindset that having carbohydrates in your diet is the ultimate evil, that having carbohydrates is going to make you fat. That is not the case. It is how you're using those carbohydrates. It is the amount of muscle tissue that you have that is going to ultimately store that glucose as glycogen in your tissues. And then also, how are you developing your muscle tissue? How active are you? These are all variables that you have to consider, but just to blanketly look at, I want to keep carbohydrates out of my diet, or I want to keep my meals limited to 1 meal per day. If you're willing to do that in the name of longevity, then you may be time to rethink what you've been doing. So I say this hopefully to be able to help someone and to open someone else's eyes. I got this text back from this doc, and I know she sat down and she laid out the plan and she was ready to help this 27-year-old male patient, and she did her due diligence with this. And a mindset that he was locked into is what is going to be at the detriment of his health if he doesn't change his mindset. There is absolutely no reason for that to be you. So with that in mind, I'm going to close out here, guys. I am Dr. Arland Hill. If you want to know more about how I help patients, you can go to drarlandhill.com. If you want to learn more about how to find high quality protein and animal-based products that you can add to your diet and that I add to my diet and that I use to try to help build and maintain my muscle tissue to support my longevity into my later years of life, then go to harvesthillsranch.com and you'll find out about how Leah and I raise uncompromising food without any sacrifice whatsoever. So until the next time, guys, I'm Dr. Arland Hill. We'll see you soon.